They ignored the new janitor. He was the undercover CEO and fired them all. Stories. Have you ever felt a profound disconnect, a growing chasm between the ideals you built your life upon and the cold reality taking shape around you? A creeping sense that the very foundations you painstakingly laid are being eroded, brick, by the hands you once trusted? I certainly have. Do you ever truly know the people who work for you? The ones you trust with your legacy, your vision, your life's work. I thought I did. But a creeping doubt, a whisper of disillusionment, led me to embark on a journey that would reveal truths far uglier, and far more beautiful, than I could have ever imagined. I became a ghost in my own empire, a shadow in the halls of power, to discover who truly deserved to stand with me, and who deserved to fall. Why would a man with millions, with a global empire under his name, choose to scrub toilets? It's a fair question, and one I've asked myself countless times during those long, lonely nights with a mop in my hand, the harsh fluorescent lights illuminating the grime I was now responsible for. My name is Alaric Vance. For nearly 5 decades, I was synonymous with Vance Tech Innovations, the company I built from a modest garage startup into a global titan. My innovations shaped industries, from the first commercially viable quantum computing prototypes to groundbreaking advancements in renewable energy storage. My name commanded respect, or so I believed, etched into the very fabric of technological progress. The early days were a whirlwind of late nights, caffeine-fueled breakthroughs, and a shared, almost spiritual, belief in the power of technology to uplift humanity. My team, then a small band of kindred spirits, felt like family. We dreamed big, and we built bigger, driven by a relentless pursuit of progress for the betterment of humanity. But over the last few years, an unsettling transformation began to take hold within the very walls I had erected. The vibrant hum of innovation, the passionate debates, the camaraderie that once fueled us, started to wane, replaced by a cold, calculating obsession with profit margins and market share. It was a gradual shift, like a slow-acting poison, subtle at first, then increasingly overt. I saw it first in the quarterly reports, numbers massaged, projections inflated, a distinct lack of genuine innovation metrics. Then, it became visible in the glazed, distant eyes of my senior executives, their conversations peppered with jargon that prioritized synergies and optimization over ingenuity and impact. Finally, I felt it in the subtle but palpable shift in the company culture. The laughter in the hallways grew rarer, replaced by a strained silence. People became numbers on a spreadsheet, their unique talents flattened into quantifiable output. Projects became leverage in a larger corporate game, their original noble intent forgotten. The human element, the very essence of innovation, was slowly being eroded, leaving behind a sterile, transactional environment. My carefully selected top brass, the individuals I had entrusted with the soul of Vance Tech, seemed to have forgotten the core values we were founded upon. They spoke of synergies and optimization, while the hallways grew colder, the smiles rarer, and the genuine camaraderie I once cherished became a distant memory. I felt an isolation deepen, a chasm forming between the idealistic founder I once was and the corporate behemoth I had unwittingly unleashed. The company I had poured my life into, the vision that had driven me, was slowly becoming unrecognizable, a sleek, soulless machine driven by an insatiable hunger for more. I tried to address it, of course. My attempts were met with the practiced politeness of those who knew how to speak without truly listening. I held meetings, long, often frustrating discussions where my words seemed to dissipate into the air. I sent out memos, eloquent appeals to our shared history and our founding principles, which I suspected were barely skimmed before being filed away. I even invited a few of them for private dinners at my estate, attempting to rekindle the old flame, to remind them of the passion that once bound us. I spoke of the early days, of the sacrifices we made, of the vision that had guided us. But their responses were polished, rehearsed, devoid of any real understanding. They would nod earnestly, their faces reflecting carefully constructed expressions of concern, then spout corporate platitudes about market realities and shareholder value, never quite meeting my gaze. They'd finish their expensive meals, offer their insincere thanks, and then return to their opulent offices, undoubtedly continuing their ruthless power plays and financial maneuvering. It was like trying to fill a sieve with water. My words, my legacy, my very spirit were simply draining away, leaving me feeling increasingly helpless and frustrated. The vastness of my own company, once a source of pride, now felt like an unfeeling, unyielding opponent. The breaking point arrived during a particularly sterile board meeting, held in a room designed for intimidation rather than collaboration, all dark wood and cold marble. A proposal was made to cut a significant portion of our R&D budget for what was termed short-term market advantage. This particular R&D project was close to my heart, a venture into advanced sustainable energy solutions that had the potential to genuinely change lives, providing clean, affordable power to millions in underserved regions, not just boost stock prices. It was the kind of project that defined VanceTech's original mission. When I voiced my concerns, reminding them of the project's long-term human benefit and its alignment with our foundational ethos, Bryce Harrington, my senior vice president, looked at me with an almost imperceptible smirk, a flicker of dismissiveness in his eyes. He was a man who had climbed the corporate ladder with a chilling efficiency, his charm a thin veneer over a core of pure ambition. "Alaric," he'd said, his voice dripping with feigned deference, the words a saccharine poison, "we understand your emotional attachment, but business is business. We need to be agile, lean, ruthless." Serafina Hayes, his cunning protégé and director of strategic initiatives, simply nodded, a predatory gleam in her own gaze. Her intelligence was undeniable, but it was wielded with the precision of a scalpel, always seeking the most vulnerable point. It was then I knew. They didn't see me as the visionary founder anymore, they saw me as an aging relic, an obstacle to their ambitions, a man holding on to antiquated ideals, a sentimental fool clinging to the past. The company was no longer mine, not in spirit. That night, I couldn't sleep. The disillusionment gnawed at me, a relentless ache in my chest. How could I ensure VanceTech remained true to its founding principles after I was gone? How could I tell who genuinely believed in our mission and who was merely playing a part, waiting for their chance to carve up my legacy like a Thanksgiving turkey? I needed to see beyond the polished facades, the tailored suits, the carefully constructed corporate personas. I needed to witness their true character, unvarnished and raw, when they thought no one important was watching. The idea, outlandish and born of desperation, began to take root. It was a risky gamble, a plunge into the unknown, but I felt I had no other choice. My legacy, the very soul of VanceTech, depended on it. And so, the plan began to formulate. It was audacious, perhaps even a little mad, but it was the only way I knew how to truly see. I meticulously orchestrated my transformation, a reverse metamorphosis. My personal assistant, Miriam, bless her loyal heart, was sworn to absolute secrecy, privy only to the bare minimum of my intentions, enough to manage my affairs while I was away on a special, highly confidential personal retreat. Her raised eyebrow and knowing glance told me she suspected more, but her loyalty was absolute. I contacted a retired makeup artist friend, Agnes, a true artist who had specialized in theatrical disguises for decades. Together, in a small, discreet studio outside the city, we crafted Arthur Jenkins, a frail, unassuming 68-year-old man. We gave him a slight stoop, hunched with the weight of years, his once sharp eyes dulled by a lifetime of hard labor, his movements slow and deliberate. We grayed my hair further, added prosthetic wrinkles that deepened around my eyes and mouth, softened my once sharp jawline, and gave me a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in my hands, enough to suggest vulnerability. My voice, usually commanding, was lowered to a soft, almost reedy whisper, one that would naturally be overlooked in a bustling office environment. I bought ill-fitting, faded work clothes from thrift stores, polyester shirts, stained trousers, worn-out shoes with scuffed soles, clothes that screamed, invisible. I even started practicing a shuffling gait, consciously slowing my pace, adopting the weary rhythm of someone whose body had seen better days. I spent weeks immersing myself in the role, watching documentaries about aging, studying the mannerisms of elderly cleaning staff in public places, observing their quiet diligence, their often ignored presence, learning to blend into the background, to become a part of the scenery. The indignity of it, the constant effort to appear less than I was a humbling, almost painful experience. Every ache in my back, every deliberate slowing of my thoughts, was a reminder of the chasm I was trying to bridge. Then, with the help of a trusted HR contact, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, no relation to my alter ego, thankfully, who was genuinely unaware of my true identity, I secured a temporary janitorial position at Vance Tech's headquarters. I presented myself as Arthur Jenkins, a widower needing a small, steady income to supplement his meager pension. Sarah, a kind woman who genuinely cared about her employees, seemed to take pity on Arthur, offering me the position with a sympathetic smile. The irony was almost unbearable. I, Alaric Vance, the founder, the CEO, the man whose face was on the plaques and awards adorning these very walls, was now Arthur Jenkins, the new janitor. My millions sat untouched in banks, my power lay dormant, and my reputation was shed like an old skin. I walked into my own company, utterly invisible, utterly inconsequential, and utterly ready to conduct the most important test of my life. I was about to find out exactly what kind of empire I had built, and what kind of people I had allowed to run it. The suspense, for me, was not in the outcome, but in the journey of discovery, in observing the raw, unvarnished truth that lay beneath the corporate veneer. The air conditioning in the executive suites, once a symbol of comfort, now felt like a chilling reminder of the coldness that had settled over my company. So, how did my loyal executives treat the new, seemingly invisible janitor? The answer, as I would soon discover, was a stark, brutal revelation that cut deeper than any market downturn ever could. My first few days as Arthur Jenkins were a blur of mops, buckets, and the deafening silence of anonymity. I moved through the gleaming hallways of Vance Tech, a phantom in plain sight. No one made eye contact. No one offered a greeting. I was simply part of the background, an extension of the building's infrastructure, no more significant than a water cooler or a potted plant. This in itself was a profound observation, a chilling testament to the dehumanization I had suspected. The constant hum of computers and hushed conversations around me seemed to amplify my own silence, making me feel truly alone, despite being surrounded by hundreds of people. Other cleaning staff, mostly older men and women like Arthur, offered small, knowing nods, a shared understanding of their overlooked status. They were a quiet, diligent community, often working in shifts that meant they rarely saw the corporate highflyers, existing in a parallel world within the same building. I learned from them the subtle art of observation, how to listen without being heard, how to blend into the shadows. My primary focus, however, was Bryce Harrington and Serafina Hayes. Their offices were on the executive floor, a sanctuary of polished chrome, imported marble, and hushed ambition, far removed from the bustling cubicles below. I deliberately scheduled my cleaning rounds to coincide with their busiest hours, feigning a need to restock supplies or attend to a priority spill. This allowed me to linger, to catch glimpses of their interactions, their true personalities, when they believed no one of consequence was watching. I carried a small, discreet digital recorder in my pocket, disguised as a hearing aid, capturing whispers and conversations that would otherwise be lost. I also learned to position myself near open doors or glass walls, my mop a perfect alibi for extended listening. What I witnessed confirmed my deepest fears, turning my anxieties into concrete evidence. Bryce Harrington, with his perfectly coiffed silver hair and predatory smile, was a master of corporate manipulation. I saw him berate subordinates behind closed doors, his voice a low, venomous hiss, barely audible but laden with menace. His targets would emerge from his office looking pale and defeated, their shoulders slumped. Yet, he would emerge moments later with a charming, disarming grin for a higher-up or a potential investor, his transformation instantaneous and utterly convincing. On one occasion, I was wiping down the immense glass conference table after a particularly tense meeting, ostensibly cleaning up coffee rings and scattered crumbs, when Bryce walked in, phone pressed to his ear. He was discussing a deal, a merger that involved a smaller, innovative startup. "Just squeeze them dry, then discard," he chuckled into the phone, completely oblivious to my presence, assuming the old janitor was deaf or simply irrelevant. "Their tech is good, but they're desperate. We'll offer them peanuts, absorb their IP, and then they'll be history. No loose ends, no ethical qualms, just pure profit." My hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from a simmering anger that burned deep within me. This was my company, built on fostering innovation, not crushing it, on empowering bright minds, not exploiting their desperation. The weight of the mop handle felt heavy, but it was nothing compared to the weight of his words. Serafina Hayes was equally, if not more, unsettling. Her ambition was a palpable aura around her, sharp and unyielding, cutting through the air like a razor. She moved with a calculated grace, her eyes constantly scanning, assessing, looking for advantage. She rarely wasted a word or a movement. One afternoon, as I was emptying a waste bin near her office, a bin that was often suspiciously full of shredded documents, I saw her deliberately knock over a precarious stack of files belonging to a junior analyst named Marcus, sending papers scattering across the polished floor. Marcus was a quiet, diligent young man known for his meticulous organization. "Oh, Arthur," she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness, "a performance designed to humiliate, how clumsy of me. Would you be a dear and pick these up? And perhaps organize them while you're at it? They're quite sensitive, you know." She watched me with a smirk as I painstakingly gathered the documents, my aged hands fumbling slightly, making sure to spread them out just a little more for my inconvenience. It was a clear power play, a small act of calculated cruelty designed to remind everyone, even the invisible janitor, of her absolute authority and their subservience. She did this regularly, leaving overflowing coffee cups on the very edge of her desk, scattering crumbs on the pristine floor just after I'd cleaned, or accidentally spilling water near where I had just finished polishing. Each time, her eyes would flicker to me, a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips, as if challenging me to react, to break character. And each time, I would simply nod, clean with painstaking slowness, and add another tick mark to my mental ledger, a growing tally of their abuses. Their contempt for me, for Arthur, was a constant, gnawing presence. I was the silent observer of their moral decay, a witness to their increasingly brazen disregard for ethics and basic human decency. I heard their whispered conversations in the elevator, their dismissive remarks about the old cleaning guy, as I stood right beside them, clutching my bucket. "He just shuffles around, probably senile," Bryce once muttered to Serafina, loud enough for me to hear as I pretended to struggle with a particularly stubborn stain on the floor nearby, my back aching from the deliberate hunch. Serafina responded with a derisive snort, "Honestly, why do they even hire people like that anymore? He's probably costing us more in benefits than he's worth. We need to streamline the service staff, too." They saw me as a burden, an irrelevant fixture, a sign of inefficiency. Their words, like tiny daggers, pierced the thin veil of my disguise, but instead of inflicting pain, they solidified my resolve. Each insult, each deliberate mess, each dismissive glance, was a piece of evidence, a testament to the rot festering at the heart of Vance Tech. The company I built, the one I envisioned as a beacon of progress, was becoming a cesspool of corporate greed and casual cruelty. The humiliation was profound, but the knowledge I gained was invaluable. But amidst the darkness, amidst the cold, calculating machinations of Bryce and Serafina, there was a flicker of light. His name was Kalen Reed, a junior software developer, barely out of college, with a bright, earnest face and an air of genuine curiosity that seemed almost out of place in this increasingly cynical environment. Kalen worked late, often hunched over his computer, debugging lines of code that would make my head spin, his brow furrowed in concentration. Unlike Bryce and Serafina, Kalen saw me not just as a cleaning uniform, an anonymous background figure, but as a person. One evening, as the executive floor emptied and the cleaning crew began their shift, I was meticulously cleaning the kitchenette on his floor, wiping down the counters until they gleamed. Kalen emerged from his office, stretching languidly, a half-empty mug of coffee in his hand, a visible exhaustion etched on his youthful face. He noticed me, something Bryce and Serafina rarely did, their eyes always seeming to glide right over me. "Hey, Arthur," he said, his voice warm and unforced, a genuine human sound in the sterile silence. "Long night, huh? You want some of this? It's still warm, just a bit of a leftover." He offered me his coffee, a simple gesture of shared humanity, a moment of uncalculated kindness. Alaric Vance, CEO, founder, billionaire, was offered half a mug of lukewarm coffee by a junior developer, and it felt like the most precious gift I had received in years, a beacon of warmth in the corporate chill. I politely declined, citing my shift ending soon, but the gesture warmed me to my core, a tiny ember of hope rekindled within me. He didn't stop there. He'd occasionally strike up conversations, not just polite formalities, but genuine interactions. He would ask me about my day, sometimes even sharing a small, personal anecdote about his own struggles with a particularly complex algorithm or a frustrating meeting. "Rough day with that new algorithm," he'd sigh, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. "It's like trying to teach a cat to fetch, you know." He didn't talk at me, he talked with me, as if my opinion, my presence, truly mattered. He even learned my cleaning schedule, sometimes purposely waiting for me to pass by his office to offer a quick word or a weary smile. Sometimes, I'd see him quietly helping other junior staff, patiently explaining complex concepts or lending an ear to their frustrations. He was a natural leader, driven by empathy and a genuine desire to help, not by a hunger for power. One particularly late night, the building almost deserted save for Kalen and myself, I was dusting the shelves in his department, the rhythmic swipe of my cloth a hypnotic sound. Kalen was facing a particularly thorny coding problem, his screen filled with lines of baffling symbols. He looked up, catching my eye, a frown of deep concentration on his face. "Hey Arthur," he began, a slight hesitation in his voice, as if wondering if he should bother the old janitor with his complex problems. Can I ask you something? You've seen a lot in your life, right? Maybe you have a different perspective, an outside view that I'm missing." My heart gave a curious lurch. He was asking me, the janitor, for advice, genuinely valuing my imagined life experience. "It's this project," he continued, pulling up a complex diagram on his screen, his finger tracing lines of code. "We're building a new encryption protocol, a really critical one for our next-gen communication system. But Bryce and Serafina are pushing for a shortcut, backdoor, as they call it, for easier access for monitoring and rapid updates. They say it'll speed up deployment and give us a competitive edge. But it feels wrong, Arthur. It compromises the whole point of encryption, doesn't it? It leaves us vulnerable, and more importantly, it leaves our users vulnerable to potential data breaches, maybe even government surveillance if misused. My team and I have voiced concerns, but they just brush us aside, calling us idealistic and naive." I feigned a thoughtful gaze, leaning heavily on my mop handle, my Arthur persona fully engaged. "Well, son," I said, my voice raspy with practiced age, "in my experience, shortcuts often lead to longer, more complicated paths down the road. Especially when it comes to security, be it of a building or a digital system. A strong foundation, built with integrity, lasts. A weak one, no matter how quick to build, always crumbles eventually, often taking down far more than just itself. Trust, once broken, is a very difficult thing to rebuild, whether it's between people or between a company and its users. Kalen's eyes widened, a light of understanding dawning, a spark of conviction igniting. Integrity, he murmured, repeating the word as if tasting it for the first time in a long while. You're right, Arthur. It's not just about the code, is it? It's about what we stand for. It's about trust. He looked at me, a silent gratitude shining in his eyes, a stark contrast to the dismissive glances I received from the executives. This conversation, innocent as it seemed, opened a floodgate. Kalen, seeing me as a wise old man, with no stake in the corporate ladder, no ambition to climb, started inadvertently revealing more details about Bryce and Serafina's schemes. He mentioned the immense pressure they exerted on his team to cut corners, to falsify progress reports to meet unrealistic targets, often threatening their jobs if they didn't comply. He spoke of hushed meetings in executive lounges, away from prying eyes, of data manipulations that made failing projects appear successful, and of a growing unease among the younger developers about the ethical implications of some of their projects that seemed increasingly focused on exploitation rather than true innovation. He even hinted at financial irregularities related to outsourced contracts that seemed to consistently favor companies linked to obscure shell corporations, a suspicion he had but no proof to back up. He shared these details not as a whistleblower, not with malice, but as someone seeking moral guidance from an impartial elder, someone he genuinely respected, someone he could trust with his conscience. Each piece of information Kalen offered, each shared concern, was a confirmation of my suspicions, a damning indictment of the corruption festering under Bryce and Serafina's leadership. He was unknowingly providing me with the missing pieces of a very dark puzzle, assembling a case against them, one piece of truth at a time. My little digital recorder in my pocket worked overtime. The contrast between their callous disregard and Kalen's pure kindness was a chasm, wide and undeniable. Bryce and Serafina saw me as a means to an end, or worse, an inconvenience to be dismissed. Kalen saw me as a human being, worthy of respect, worthy of conversation, worthy of having a perspective. Their actions confirmed the rot. Kalen's actions confirmed that the spirit of Vance Tech, the integrity I had strived to instill, was not entirely dead. It lived on, quietly, in the hearts of people like him, people who still believed in the ideals I had founded the company upon. My decision was solidified. The experiment was complete. The evidence was overwhelming, and the path forward was clear. It was time for Arthur Jenkins to disappear, and for Alaric Vance to return. The stage was set for a dramatic conclusion, and the anticipation, for me, was not a worry, but a quiet, controlled certainty. But every masquerade, no matter how meticulously planned, must eventually end, mustn't it? The final act of my Arthur Jenkins persona was carefully orchestrated, designed for maximum impact, for a revelation that would leave no doubt, no room for denial. The moment I chose was a critical quarterly board meeting, one where Bryce Harrington and Serafina Hayes were scheduled to present their vision for the next fiscal year, a vision I knew was riddled with ethical compromises and predatory strategies, much of which Kalen had unknowingly revealed. It was to be their coronation, and my dismantling of it would be absolute. I arrived at Vance Tech headquarters that morning not in my worn janitor's uniform, but in a bespoke charcoal suit, tailored to perfection, the fabric whispering authority with every movement. My hair, recently trimmed and styled, was meticulously in place, my eyes, once dulled for the role, now gleamed with their old, sharp intensity, honed by weeks of quiet observation. I had shed the frail posture, the shuffling gait, the reedy voice. I was Alaric Vance, the founder, the CEO, in full command, every inch the titan they had forgotten. The executive parking lot, usually buzzing with the expensive cars of the elite, was eerily quiet as my armored Mercedes Maybach, a vehicle I hadn't driven in months, purred to a stop directly at the main entrance. My longtime chauffeur, Michael, a man of unwavering discretion and loyalty, ever discreet, opened the door with a practiced ease. As I stepped out, the few early bird executives making their way in paused, their coffee cups frozen mid-air, eyes wide with dawning recognition, then confusion. Was that? No, it couldn't be. Alaric Vance rarely came in this early, and certainly not with this air of almost military precision, this silent, powerful presence. Whispers, like scattered leaves, began to rustle through the sparse crowd. I walked directly to the boardroom, my footsteps echoing with a newfound purpose down the polished hallways I had cleaned so many times as Arthur, each step a reclamation of my territory. Security personnel, who had dismissed me daily as Arthur, now snapped to attention, their faces a mixture of surprise and respect, their eyes flicking from my imposing figure to the Maybach still waiting. The sheer audacity of my return, without announcement, without fanfare, was itself a powerful statement, a prelude to the storm. Inside the boardroom, the tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Bryce and Serafina were mid-presentation, their voices confident, their slides slick and persuasive, filled with impressive but misleading figures. The room was filled with board members, senior executives, and a few key department heads, including Kalen Reed, who sat quietly in the back, observing with a furrowed brow, a troubled expression on his face as he listened to their distorted vision. My entrance, however, shattered their carefully constructed reality into 1,000 pieces. The double doors, heavy and imposing, swung open, not with a bang, but with a deliberate, controlled movement that commanded attention. All heads turned. Bryce, mid-sentence about aggressive market penetration and unprecedented growth, faltered, his eyes locking onto mine, a look of utter disbelief quickly morphing into panic. Serafina, who had been nodding imperiously, a picture of confident ambition, froze, her smile dissolving into a mask of pure, unadulterated disbelief, her usual composure utterly shattered. A hushed gasp, like a collective inhalation, rippled through the room. I walked slowly to the head of the immense mahogany table, the seat that had always been mine, but which I had deliberately vacated for this grand unveiling. There, resting on the polished surface, was a thick dossier, discreetly placed by Michael earlier that morning, a silent sentinel of truth. I picked it up, feeling its weight, the culmination of weeks of observation, of betrayal, of quiet suffering and diligent evidence gathering. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice, once a reedy whisper, now resonated with the authority of a titan, filling the room with an undeniable power. It was a voice they hadn't heard in weeks, a voice they thought they had muted, silenced for good. "Please, continue, Bryce." "Serafina. I wouldn't want to interrupt your presentation." My gaze, cold and unwavering, swept across their stunned, pale faces. They looked like deer caught in headlights, their carefully constructed personas crumbling before my eyes, revealing the fear beneath. Bryce, regaining a sliver of his composure, though his face was visibly damp with sweat, stammered, "Alaric. Sir. What are you doing here? We weren't expecting you." His voice was thin, reedy, a pale imitation of his usual booming self. I offered a mirthless smile, a chilling curve of my lips. "Oh, but I've been here all along, Bryce. More intimately than you could ever imagine." I paused, allowing the words to hang in the air, thick with unspoken meaning, allowing the Zygarnik effect to take hold, the unspoken question hammering in everyone's minds. What does he mean? The silence stretched, a taut rope threatening to snap. I then turned to the board, my voice gaining strength, each word a hammer blow. "For the past 6 weeks, I haven't been Alaric Vance, your CEO. I have been Arthur Jenkins, your janitor. The senile old man you barely noticed." A collective gasp, louder this time, filled the room, a wave of shock washing over the assembled executives. Heads swiveled wildly between me and the now ashen-faced Bryce and Serafina, who looked as if they had seen a ghost. Kalen, in the back, visibly flinched, his jaw dropping open in utter shock, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. The revelation hung in the air, thick with disbelief and dawning horror for some, and profound astonishment for others. And during my time as Arthur, I continued, my voice now laced with a steely resolve, an unwavering conviction, I've had the distinct pleasure of observing the true culture of Vanstech. The culture that some of you have diligently cultivated, deliberately fostering an environment of greed and casual cruelty. I looked directly at Bryce and Serafina, who were now trembling, their faces devoid of all color, their masks completely shattered. I've seen the deliberate messes, the casual cruelty, the dismissive contempt for those deemed invisible, for the very people who keep this building functioning. I've heard the whispered schemes, the discussions of squeezing dry smaller companies, of shortcuts that compromise our integrity and leave our users vulnerable, of questionable financial maneuvers and the manipulation of data to inflate your own successes and hide your failures. Bryce attempted to interrupt, a desperate, "Sir, this is a misunderstanding. We would never." His voice cracked with barely concealed terror. I cut him off, my voice a thunderclap, silencing him instantly. Silence. The evidence, meticulously gathered by Arthur Jenkins, speaks for itself. And it is damning. You forgot one crucial detail, Bryce. You forgot that the janitor, the senile old man, was always watching. Always listening. And he had a very good memory, amplified by technology. My gaze was unrelenting, cutting through their denials. At that precise moment, the doors opened again, and my corporate lawyer, Eleanor Vance, no relation, but a woman whose integrity was as unshakable as mine, a formidable legal mind, entered, flanked by two imposing, uniformed security officers. She carried a stack of legal documents, their presence a silent threat. Bryce Harrington, Serafina Hayes, Eleanor's voice was sharp and clear, devoid of emotion, cutting through the stunned silence like a diamond. You are hereby relieved of all duties, effective immediately. Your access to company systems has been revoked. Furthermore, given the extensive evidence of corporate malfeasance, unethical conduct, and potential fraud, Vanstech Innovations will be pursuing legal action to the fullest extent of the law. You will be escorted from the premises. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sharp, authoritative click of Eleanor's heels as she approached the table, her gaze as unwavering as mine. Bryce and Serafina, their faces a horrifying tableau of shock, humiliation, and dawning panic, could only stare, their empire of lies collapsing around them in a spectacular, public implosion. The game was indeed over, and they had lost everything. The immediate fallout was swift and brutal for Bryce and Serafina. Their carefully constructed worlds, built on ambition and deceit, crumbled in a matter of minutes, exposed for the hollow structures they truly were. As Eleanor read out the charges, detailing instances of financial manipulation, intellectual property theft from smaller companies, that squeeze them dry, comments taking on a terrifying new context, corroborated by my recordings, and the deliberate endangerment of our new encryption protocol for a supposed backdoor access. All meticulously corroborated by my observations and the physical evidence I had collected, their faces went from ashen to a ghastly shade of green, their eyes wide with fear. Bryce, usually so articulate, could only stammer incoherent denials, his eyes darting wildly around the room, searching desperately for an ally, a way out of this nightmare. There was none. Serafina, whose cunning was her greatest weapon, visibly deflated, her shoulders slumping as the overwhelming weight of her transgressions pressed down on her, stripping her of all arrogance. The security officers, under Eleanor's stoic direction, moved to escort them. Bryce, in a final act of pathetic desperation, turned to me, his voice a pathetic whimper, stripped of all its former bluster. "Alaric, please. You can't do this. My career, my reputation." I met his gaze, my eyes devoid of mercy, filled instead with a quiet, burning justice. Your career, Bryce, was built on the backs of others, a pyramid scheme of exploitation. Your reputation was a hollow shell, masking a heart of greed and a soul devoid of integrity. You destroyed those yourself, not I. I merely revealed the truth, a truth you tried to bury under layers of deception. As they were led away, their protests growing louder, fading into the distance down the hallway, a collective sigh of relief seemed to sweep through the boardroom. The corporate rot, for so long a festering wound, was finally being excised, its cancerous tendrils cut away. Then, my attention turned to Kalen Reed. He was still in the back, looking utterly bewildered, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension, processing the incredible revelation. The realization that the old janitor he had shared coffee with, the man whose wise old man perspective he had sought, was, in fact, the CEO and founder, was clearly a lot to process. I could see the gears turning in his mind, connecting the dots, remembering our conversations. "Kalen," I said, my voice softer now, having achieved its purpose, but still carrying the weight of command, a warmth beginning to seep into it. "Please, come forward." He hesitated for a moment, then slowly, almost hesitantly, made his way to the front of the room, his eyes still fixed on me, a question etched on his face, a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Kalen," I began, my gaze kind but firm, "for the past 6 weeks, I saw you. Not just as a junior developer, but as a man of profound integrity. You treated Arthur Jenkins with respect, with kindness, with genuine humanity, even when others chose to see him as invisible, as inconsequential. You sought counsel, not for personal gain or corporate advancement, but because your conscience was troubled by what you observed, by the ethical compromises being forced upon you and your team. You represent the true spirit of Vance Tech, the values of innovation, ethics, and human dignity that I founded this company upon. You kept the flame alive when others sought to extinguish it." Kalen swallowed hard, his eyes beginning to well up, the emotion clearly overwhelming him. "Sir. Mr. Vance, I don't know what to say. I just tried to do what was right." "There's no need to say anything," I replied, a small, genuine smile finally touching my lips, a smile of profound satisfaction and hope. "Your actions spoke volumes, Kalen, far louder than any corporate platitude. Bryce and Serafina saw an old man, a burden, an inconvenience, a target for their petty cruelties. You saw a human being, a fellow traveler in this world. And you, Kalen, are precisely the kind of leader Vance Tech needs for its future, a future built on genuine innovation and unwavering ethics." I then made my pronouncement, one that would redefine the company's trajectory. "Effective immediately, Kalen Reed, you are promoted to Director of Ethical Technologies. You will head a new, fully funded division, dedicated to rigorously ensuring that all our innovations adhere to the highest ethical standards, from conceptualization to deployment. You will have full autonomy in this role and will report directly to me. Furthermore, as a testament to your unwavering integrity and your invaluable, albeit unwitting, assistance in uncovering the malfeasance that threatened our company, you will receive a significant stock option package, equivalent to a multi-million-dollar investment, ensuring your vested interest in Vance Tech's future success. Consider it a down payment on the future you will help us build, a future where integrity is paramount." Kalen's eyes widened further, if that was even possible, tears now openly streaming down his face, a mixture of disbelief, relief, and gratitude. He stood there, trembling slightly, completely overwhelmed. "Mr. Vance, I can't. I just tried to be a decent person, to protect what I thought was right." "Exactly, Kalen," I affirmed, my voice filled with a profound satisfaction that echoed deep within my weary soul. "And that, in this world, is often the greatest strength. Welcome to the leadership team. You've earned it, and Vance Tech needs you." The applause that erupted from the rest of the board was genuine, thunderous, a clear indication that many of them, too, had been silently yearning for a return to our core values, for an end to the suffocating reign of greed. Kalen, overwhelmed, could only nod, tears of disbelief and gratitude mingling on his cheeks. It was a moment of profound vindication, a clear signal that the old guard of greed and cynicism was out, and a new era of integrity and ethical leadership was beginning. The air in the boardroom, once heavy with tension, now felt lighter, cleaner, filled with a renewed sense of purpose. So what happened to them all? Bryce Harrington and Serafina Hayes faced the full force of the law. The evidence I had meticulously collected as Arthur Jenkins, combined with further investigations spurred by my revelations and the whistleblowers who now felt empowered to come forward, painted a damning picture. They were not only stripped of their positions and their reputations irrevocably shattered, but they also faced significant legal repercussions for corporate fraud, intellectual property theft, and unethical business practices that endangered public trust. Their ambitious climb up the corporate ladder ended in a very public, very humiliating plummet. They lost everything they had so ruthlessly sought to gain, and then some. Their names became cautionary tales within the industry, whispered warnings about the consequences of unchecked ambition and moral bankruptcy, a stark reminder that even the most powerful can fall. As for VanceTech Innovations, the company underwent a profound transformation. The cleansing of the executive ranks sent a clear message, a seismic shift that reverberated through every department. I recommitted the company to its founding principles, decentralizing power, fostering a culture of transparency, open communication, and true meritocracy. We reprioritized long-term, ethical innovation over short-term profits, reinvesting heavily in R&D, particularly in the sustainable energy projects Bryce had tried to axe. Kalen Reed, now the Director of Ethical Technologies, thrived in his new role. He quickly became a respected voice within the company, his moral compass guiding critical decisions, ensuring our technology served humanity responsibly and with integrity. He hired a diverse team of bright, passionate individuals who shared his vision, and together, they spearheaded initiatives that not only enhanced our products but also rebuilt trust with our employees and our customers, restoring VanceTech's tarnished image. He proved that genuine kindness was not a weakness, but a powerful foundation for true, enduring leadership. For me, Alaric Vance, the experience brought a profound sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction that settled deep within my bones. The isolation I had felt at the top dissipated as I witnessed the genuine resurgence of the company's soul, like a garden coming back to life after a long winter. I had found my successor, not in the polished, power-hungry executives I had mistakenly elevated, but in the unassuming kindness of a junior developer, a young man who embodied the very values I had feared were lost. I now regularly mentor Kalen, guiding him, sharing my half-century of experience, confident that the legacy I built will be in good, ethical hands, nurtured by a leader who understands the true meaning of progress. The weight of disillusionment that had settled on my shoulders lifted, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. I had conducted my experiment, endured the humiliation, witnessed the ugliness, and ultimately, uncovered the beautiful truth about the human spirit and the enduring power of integrity. I learned that true leadership isn't just about vision or profit, it's about fostering a culture where respect isn't conditional, where kindness isn't a weakness, and where integrity is the most valuable currency. It's about how you treat the invisible, the voiceless, the ones who seemingly have nothing to offer you, because their perspective is often the most revealing. Because in their eyes, you often see the clearest reflection of your own soul, stripped bare of all pretenses. The true character of a person, and indeed, of a company, is revealed not in how they treat their superiors or their peers, but in how they treat those who can do nothing for them. It is in those moments of unvarnished interaction that the truth shines brightest, for better or for worse. It's a lesson that changed my life, and reshaped my empire. Our channel is full of stories like this, narratives of deception and truth, of trials and triumphs, all designed to illuminate the complexities of the human heart. If you've enjoyed this journey into the heart of corporate power and the ultimate test of character, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss our next story. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever been surprised by someone's true colors, revealed when they thought no one important was watching? Tell me your story in the comments below.